Morning.
How's it going?
Yeah, it's okay. What about with you?
Just same old, same old. Hoping the technology doesn't fail me today.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad Dr. Coghlan isn't on there. It would have been way too long.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
I
Yeah,
saw that Front Range Rail one. It's a long one.
it is. It's a lot of
Yeah,
information there, but
yeah. Good. Okay. Looks good. I looked at the slides and yeah, I think it would be good.
cool. Looks like we got a few folks joining us here slowly
Yep,
but surely.
that's great. Good job. All right. I'll go get some water and I'll be right back.
Morning.
Morning.
I've got it.
Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, great. You can hear me.
Carson, I'm getting a couple of people emailing me saying they didn't get the Zoom link. So if I'm on and off, it's because I'm sending them the Zoom link.
Hmm. Okay. Let me know if I can help.
Sounds good. Yeah, I don't know. Vince didn't get one. Jeremy Rodriguez didn't get one. So, and I think both of you and I sent them out, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Strange.
Yeah.
Carson, do you just want us to keep the video off until we are speaking?
That is up to you, Mr. Grillberger. Whatever you think.
Okay.
Let's see, so it's 7:30. Karen, do you think we need to wait just a little bit for those folks who are just getting the link, or should we move ahead? Okay, so let's get started. I have 7:31 on my computer, so let's move forward here and get this meeting started. So welcome everybody. It is September 24th. Welcome to our September NATA meeting. Please make sure to sign in on the chat. That way everyone just knows who's on the call, who's here, and that's how we're going to be doing introductions. All right, first up, I have approval of the August 27th NATA meeting minutes. Are there any changes that folks saw on the minutes that need to take place? And if not, can I get a motion to approve these minutes?
I have a motion to approve the August 27th NATA meetings. This is Joyce.
Thank you, Joyce.
Second, Jessica.
Thank you, Jessica. All right. Anyone opposed to those minutes, just say aye. All right, so we're gonna approve those minutes and then move on to Smart Commute agenda. Karen, Stewart, and team. Oh, Karen, I think you're on mute. That's weird.
About now.
There we go. Now we hear you.
Okay, don't know what I did. Just wanted to remind everyone our 8th annual Transform will be a virtual event, October 22nd. Do we have the video, that the little clip that goes with that? There you go. So this is our little teaser for the event. Just wanted to remind you that it will be right after the October 22nd NATA meeting. The NATA meeting will be a short one in October. And we will be featuring really train travel. The N line will be celebrating the N line with artist interviews on all the artwork that's on the N line. We'll have some speakers that will be addressing the future of rail travel. I think it'll be a pretty interesting Transform this year, and it's open free to everyone. And I appreciate the membership of Smart Commute, who will be the sponsors of this event. In a companion piece with this, we're putting together a commemorative coffee table book, 8.5 by 11 coffee table book that will be primarily pictorial and show everything from the beginning of this effort to get the N line underway to all the events that happened last Monday. And so we're pretty excited about putting that together. We've got some great archived photos from the groundbreaking, some historical photos, and then photos of all the construction and events. At our Transform, we're hoping to get some good video from RTD to show the N line in either as a drone or some kind of a quick video to show the N line. So we're pretty excited about it. We're happy to do it. And we're working on a keynote speaker right now. I'll turn it back over to Carson and Tammy if they have anything else that they'd like to add to that.
I don't, Tammy.
The only thing I'd like to add is that if anybody has any really great historical photos of like the East Lake grain silos, National Western Stock Show, anything along the line, to send those over. Those are, the historical ones are the only one we're having a hard time finding, but otherwise we've got some great photos. That's it.
So Karen, I have a quick logistics question about Transform. So are we going to be sending out a different link than the NATA link, or are we all kind of going to get on the NATA call and stay on throughout? How is that going to work?
Yes, it's going to be different. So the
Okay.
NATA meeting will be one, and then we had to bump up our bandwidth on the Zoom in order to accommodate more than 100 people. So we will give you a second link for
Okay.
Transform, and we anticipate more participation than just the NATA participation. So we'll send two
Perfect.
links. We'll send one for the NATA meeting and then the second one for the Transform.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And,
Great, and that's-
go ahead.
That's all we have on that.
Okay, great, awesome. So yeah, let's make sure, guys, if we do have some of those historical photos, we send them over. Tammy, I know that, so Northland, we had our 50th, so we've been collecting a lot of historical items, including lots of photos. So we could try and connect you that way through, at least from the Northland side.
That would be great.
All right, well, thank you guys. Thank you for that update. I think everyone's excited about it, and yeah, can't wait till next month. All right, any other questions that this group has for Transform questions or general smart commute questions? I'm not seeing any. So, yes. Okay, sorry, I thought someone said something. Okay, so let's move on to our RTD director's comments. So we have quite a few on the line, and we have lots of highlights to kind of go over. Of course, the end line, the new GM, and then the District I director update. So I will leave it to you guys to organize.
Okay. I don't know who else is out there. I think Judy Lubow may be on. I'm not sure if Lynn Geisinger or Troy Letmore.
Yeah, Judy's on.
Judy, do you want to talk about the District I director update, because that's your district?
Sure. I contacted Boulder County yesterday, and they said as of yesterday they only had one applicant, a person, I don't know the person, TJ Cole, C-O-L-E, but they are expecting more over the weekend. The final day is Monday, close of business. So don't all rush over there and fill out your application.
The word is out.
The word is out.
Oh, boy.
However, there are folks interested, and they might decide to apply by Monday. So good luck to all of us with that.
Great. If you've got anything else you want to talk about these other items, please go ahead, Judy.
Not really. I'm just personally incredibly excited about our new general manager to be, and she comes with very high recommendations, and really looking forward to someone who, by her own estimation, is very much a people person, and I think that is something that really needs to go forward with RTDs. A lot of concern with what people think and care about, so I'm looking forward. And that's about it for me.
Great, thanks. And with regard to the new general manager, just so everybody knows, we've been in the middle of negotiating her contract. We've got a subcommittee called the General Manager Executive Search Committee that was put together, I don't know, months ago, and we've been meeting regularly to get through this process. We're in the final minutes of getting that done, and it's looking very positive. If we get this done by the end of this month, more than likely she'll want to give a 30-day notice to her existing employer, and we'll probably be here sometime in very early November. That's the kind of the timeline on her getting here. As far as the online opening, I know a lot of you were at the opening events or have reported riding the train, and hopefully that's been a good experience. It's a great train line. So if you haven't gone out there this week until Sunday night or whatever, is free, and even after that, it's going to be a local fair from end to end for the first 6 months, thanks to Representative Kyle Mullica and some board members as well. So I think that's about all I have now. Well, I guess the opening, I mean, you know, it was unusual. We had a 75 person limit. Everybody was kind of spread out in the parking lot, and it was really weird. But I guess opening a commuter rail line during a pandemic is probably pretty weird too. So, well, we got it done, and thanks to our N-Line team, our leadership team, and Paul Ballard for making that happen. That's all I have. If there's anybody else out there that wants to say something, there you go.
This is Judy again. I just wanted to say that it is remarkable that we had that opening, and the N line is a terrific line, and it's just unfortunate that the opening had to be happening during a pandemic. It is a real achievement, and I want to congratulate all of us because we all had a part in it. Thank you.
Thanks, Judy. And just so everybody knows, we have not forgotten that we've got 5.5 more miles to go, and we're going to make sure we keep that top of mind. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, we still have more to go on the N line. It is not complete, and I think it's important that we continue to push that message. So in my opinion, I thought the opening was absolutely fantastic. It was very weird with everyone having to be spread out, but you know what? It was great to have the speakers show up and just say wonderful things about this process. I know that there's a lot of people on this call that have fought a really long time to make sure that the N-line happened, and they committed a lot of time and effort to that advocacy. And so thank you so much for everybody who's been a part of NATA, who really kind of helped drive this home, if you will. And then I do want to just do a quick shout out to all of the artwork on the line as well. I think that it'll be good if you guys have the opportunity just to kind of, you know, take a step out at each station and kind of look and see what each station looks like. I will do a quick plug for the 112th station because Northland did some amazing artwork. So definitely stop and kind of look around there. It was great. So lots to explore, lots to try. And then I think we're just so excited that this day is finally here. So it was a great accomplishment. So thank you, everybody involved. All right, do we have any other members who want to talk about or have any questions for the directors on the line?
Julie, it's Jessica. I'm just going to say the same, echoing. Basically, I was just blown away by the whole opening process. Of course, none of us wanted to have a pandemic in place and limited celebration, but I think nobody cared, honestly, the fact that we were opening the line. It was just such an incredible accomplishment, and you know, kudos to our directors and RTD staff for getting that done. But I also want to shout out to Kent and Brooke for their work on this over the years, and for just helping us along the way, that, you know, different elected officials for how many years that you guys have had to educate and update, and Karen, you as well. So I just want to thank everybody that's been involved in this whole process. And I wrote it again last night, so I'll be writing it a lot, as much as possible. I'll get into the other little things later, but I think this is just a time for celebration at this point.
Great, thank you, Jessica. All right, everybody. So I'm not seeing any other questions or comments for our directors. And so if you do have any other opening highlights or maybe pictures if you'd like to share, please just send them to the Smart Commute team, because maybe it would be nice just to collect all of that, all of those memories together. We are going to move on in our agenda to the Front Range Rail Commission update. Randy.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Randy
morning.
Grauberger. I'm the project director for the Southwest Chief and Front Range Passenger Rail Commission, and it's a pleasure to be back with you folks again today. Karen asked me a couple months ago when would be a good time, and I said we're ready as soon as you're ready. So I think the last time we made a presentation to you was last summer. I would remember handing out some cards for a survey, and again, we've done a couple more surveys since that one, and the responses continue to come back with very strong support for this Front Range Passenger Rail project. Next slide, please. I went over with you a year ago the membership of the Rail Commission. That has remained the same except for one individual. In the fourth row for the Class 1 freight railroads, the representative from Burlington Northern Santa Fe is now DJ Mitchell. DJ is the Vice President of Passenger Rail Operations for the entire BNSF network. So we really feel honored to have DJ on the commission, and in the ongoing conversations we have with the Class 1 railroads. We meet with him about every 6 weeks. And DJ is really taking this project by the horns and committing BNSF resources to our efforts. So we're very excited about that. Next slide. Commission's purposes remain the same. The original commission was charged with basically preserving Amtrak Southwest Chief service across southeastern Colorado. We continue to do that, working closely with our neighbors in Kansas and New Mexico, and the BNSF and Amtrak. And then the last bullet at the bottom, facilitate the development of Front Range passenger rail service. And that's what most of my comments will be about today, the activities that the commission and the consultant team and the project team have taken in the last 13 months since we met. Next slide. We had some really good news earlier this week. We found out that the commission had received a CRISI grant from the Federal Railroad Administration, $548,000 in federal funds. That's matched by $137,000 of local funding for a $685,000 total project. We'll be completing the critical remaining service planning efforts that this existing consultant team is finalizing in the next couple of months. And then also doing rail traffic controller simulation modeling. This is a requirement from both the FRA and the railroads. This has to be completed before we can move on into NEPA. So once this grant is obligated and we get a consultant on board to complete this work, then the project will be ready to issue a notice of intent and move fully into NEPA. This was really exciting to get this additional funding, actually critical, because we didn't have funding to take these next steps. Next slide, please. This again is a map just showing the general corridor from Fort Collins down to Pueblo. We've narrowed this to 3 alternative alignments that I'll be talking about a little later. This map also shows the connections to Amtrak's 2 long distance trains. The California Zephyr comes through Denver. That's the red line across the east-west line that connects from Chicago to San Francisco. And then in the southeastern part of the state, the Southwest Chief connects Chicago to Los Angeles. The dashed and dotted line on the Southwest Chief indicates the work we're doing to look at a through car connection off of the Chief in La Junta that would connect into Pueblo and up to Colorado Springs. Eventually, the alignment would go from Pueblo on back down to Trinidad, and we'd eliminate that diagonal between La Junta and Trinidad. But Amtrak is got their eyes on Colorado big time, and I'll talk a little bit about that on a few slides later in the presentation. Next slide. We had a really exciting online public meeting during the month of July. Actually, it was June 29th through the 31st. We had over 10,000 people look at this project via this online public meeting. You could jump on 24/7 for 33 days. and we had some pretty exciting results. We had people looking at this, on Facebook, Twitter, on their own computers, on their tablets and laptops, on their phones. Had a lot of representation from our website, Front Range Passenger Rail. KRDO station in Colorado Springs generated a lot of excitement about this survey. Denver Post, a lot of different opportunities. Next slide. People were on that survey. The average length of time that people spent online looking at this survey and answering questions was about 4.5 minutes. So there was quite a bit of time dedicated to the survey. One of the survey questions was, what are the most important operational considerations to you for Front Range Passenger Rail? Station locations came out on top, followed by the ability to interconnect with other modes of transportation, followed then by reasonable travel times and the affordability of riding the train. Those are pretty common, and we were expecting those kinds of results on this survey. Next question. We asked a question, knowing that Denver was really the hub of the Colorado Springs, Pueblo, Fort Collins corridor. We asked a rather pointed question, offered them 3 opportunities. Where would you most want the Front Range Rail to go? Of the 3 opportunities that were selected, downtown Denver had close to 60%. The airport was about 1/3, and the rest in this 3-part question went to the Denver Tech Center. Again, this was to be expected. While we know there's already a train to DIA, a lot of people still would think that this would be a great connection from their house directly to the airport. They wouldn't have to park. But again, downtown Denver has all the employment and the special event attractions such as Coors Field, Pepsi Center, Performing Arts Center, all the restaurants and bars and things like that. So again, not surprising results with this question. Next slide. This was asked, what would the primary purposes be for using Front Range Passenger Rail? Recreation and leisure, all close to 60%, followed by commuting, and shopping and business purposes kind of picked up the slack. This was different than the modeling data that we have shown. Some of the statewide travel model that we're using to develop ridership suggests that more travel will be done by commuting than by recreation. But it was pointed out at a recent meeting when we had our segment coalition meetings last week. Myron Hora actually mentioned that it would make sense that those numbers not necessarily match up, because Myron said, while maybe fewer people are going to be commuting, they're going to be riding the train close to 200 times a year, where some of the recreation and leisure folks might ride the train 5 to 30 times a year. So the 2 numbers really don't need to match up. Next slide. This one again, where would you most likely go on Front Range Passenger Rail? Denver, Airport, Springs, the biggest cities and the biggest generators were, again, this one was sort of confirming what you would rationally think. Most of the people would be going to the largest attractions and destination centers. Next slide. We had some open-ended questions. 503 different people just provided some open-ended comments. We put these in 3 different buckets: positive, neutral, or negative. Again, well over 2/3 were positive. Neutral and negative picked up the last 31%. We were really surprised that out of the 503 comments, only 1 individual mentioned anything about COVID. We were expecting a lot of people to say, well, why are you doing Front Range Passenger Rail? Nobody's, commuting to work anymore. Everybody's working from home. It was really surprising that only 1 person out of the 503 comments had any relationship to COVID. So I guess people are pretty positive about, getting through this and moving on to a world that in the future that will be more like the world we knew prior to the middle of March. Next slide. These were some of the primary themes related to the 503 open-ended comments. Again, a lot of them were just general support. Get on with this, do it. You should have done it 10 years ago. It's badly needed. The rest of the country has passenger rail. Why not Colorado? let's get on with it. And there were also some comments related to the alignments and routes, comments related to speed of the trains, and certainly a lot of questions and comments about what's it going to cost and how we're going to pay for it. Next slide. Okay, I'll move on into some of the ridership. We've done some initial ridership modeling results, and we're finding that there is considerable demand for this project based on the statewide and front range travel model that we're using. It's highest again amongst commuters. There's more demand based on the travel model for commuters, but again, there's also significant demand for recreation and special events. We have compared our ridership projections to existing ridership around the country, and the projections for front range passenger rail fare very well compared to some of these other lines. And I have a slide showing a few of those here in just a little bit. And obviously there will be some pretty good reductions in emissions and VMT once front range passenger rail is implemented. Next slide. One of the alignments that we're looking at basically follows BNSF's freight alternative from Pueblo up to Denver, then follows the BNSF line up to Boulder, Longmont, and on up to Fort Collins. That alignment is coming up with the highest ridership of all the alternatives that we're looking at. We modeled a very aggressive model run where we used 25 trains, round trip trains a day. That basically included half-hour departures during the morning and evening peaks with hourly service the rest of the majority of the day. That generated almost 3 million riders, weekly ridership of about 9,200 individuals. And we also included some model runs adding secondary stations in Fort Carson, Monument, Louisville, and Berthoud. And that surprisingly increased ridership overall on the entire quarter by almost 20%. Next slide. These are some of the comparable peer passenger rail networks around the country. The one for Colorado is in the blue in the middle, utilizing that BNSF alignment. Again, we're right in the ballpark with the Capital Corridor in Sacramento. The South Shore and Miami corridors aren't far from them. And again, this was using the 25 trains a day in each direction with 14 stations. This included the secondary stations that I mentioned previously. Next slide. One of the issues about the first model run, we used 32 cents a mile. 32 cents a mile was the fare that was used in the interregional connectivity study that was done by CDOT back in about 2014. That looked at high-speed rail up to 180 miles an hour, basically following the I-25 and E-470 alignments. We're continuing to model that run, but that's the model fare that we started with. Since then, we have taken a look at some of the other fares around the country, and we found that most of the other fares around the country currently are about half that price. So we knocked it down to 17 cents a mile. That is also consistent with the fare approximation for the Mustang routes that CDOT is operating. So at 17 cents a mile, the ridership increased close to 50%. So those numbers that you saw on the previous slides were based on 32 cents a mile. But when we had the model runs last week at 17 cents a mile, ridership increased significantly. And again, that's not surprising. If the fares go down, you'd think ridership would go up. And in fact, it certainly did on our model. So we haven't yet reflected that 50% increase on these other slides, but we'll be doing that shortly. We just got these model runs on Monday. Next slide, please. Here's just some overview. Speed matters, but urban operation and some rural grade limits how fast we can go, especially out in the I-25 corridor. When we model that, we call that our alternative 6, following the I-25 corridor. But again, highways are built for passenger cars, and railroads have trouble with some of those grades. So that would be a serious issue in some places, both north of Denver, out along E-470, and certainly south of Denver, where some serious grades in the I-25 corridor. Connectivity and scheduling certainly have an impact. Front range ridership, we also ran some models looking at the possibility of a new future station at Burnham Yard. That's the old Union Pacific diesel maintenance facility that's for sale. CDOT is in the process of trying to acquire that. So we've taken a look at some model runs there, but Denver Union Station certainly appeared to be a better station location than Burnham Yard might have been. One interesting factor on all of the modeling we've done, there are really very few trips going end to end. And again, I guess when you think about that, that's probably not too surprising. How many times, if you're in Pueblo, do you want to go to Fort Collins? How many times, if you're in Fort Collins, do you want to go all the way to Pueblo? So there are very few end-to-end trips. And again, with Denver as the centroid for our corridor, that's really not surprising. We've matched some of the data out of our model with Front Range travel survey, some streetlight data, and census journey to work, and all of these are matching up very closely with the model run. So we have quite a bit of we believe there's quite a bit of accuracy in this modeling effort. Next slide. Okay, I want to chat with you briefly about what we're hearing from Amtrak. Yesterday, I was listening to a national webinar where Ray Lang, who is one of my 11 bosses on the Front Range Passenger Rail Commission. Ray is actually a non-voting member with Amtrak, but he made about a 45-minute presentation yesterday to a national audience where he described Amtrak's new proposal in the reauthorization of the federal transportation bill. Amtrak is including a network modernization program. This would be a $25 billion program, $5 billion a year for 5 years. And with that funding, they would create new short distance passenger rail corridors. Ray indicated on the call that the Colorado Front Range corridor is #1 on their list. They are anticipating a 3 train a day, 3 round trips a day service between Fort Collins and Pueblo. That would bring to the state of Colorado $2.1 billion of federal funding. Again, this has cleared the House of Representatives. It has not yet received a companion bill in the Senate, but Ray expects, this program to eventually move forward through the Congress. This is really exciting. We think a $2.1 billion federal investment into Front Range passenger rails, capital improvements, rolling stock, et cetera, would be a nice down payment for going ahead and completely building out Front Range passenger rail. So stay tuned on this. But again, Amtrak had previously indicated to us, just in a phone call, that Colorado was #1 on their list. But yesterday, to hear him make those comments on a national webinar, that was very exciting. Next slide. And next slide, please. Get into a little more of the nuts and bolts of our project work. We're currently in what we call level 2 evaluation, where we're comparing the various alternatives against each other. Again, we need to complete the work that we just got the Chrissy grant for yesterday, and then we will be ready to advance on into NEPA. We're anticipating a 2-year NEPA process after an NOI is initiated, and then we'd be able to move into final design and implementation. Next slide. Again, these are the 3 corridors. We've got the BNSF freight rail alignment that goes all the way from Fort Collins to Pueblo. A similar alignment, which is the BNSF alignment, except from Longmont, that varies where it comes out of Longmont to I-25 down to the north end of your brand new North Metro line, and it would connect and interplay with North Metro on into Denver Union Station. And then again, from Denver South, it would follow the BNSF corridor to Pueblo. The purple line is the E470 I-25 alignment. Again, that alignment is similar to the alignment that was looked at back in 2014 when CDOT was looking at 180 mile train service. We're only looking at maximum speeds of 125 miles an hour now, with most of the operation being in the 90 to 110 mile an hour range. Next slide. Okay, these are again just some of the specifics for the performance and operating assumptions we're doing. 24 trains a day, that was that first model run. again with hourly service except for 30-minute peaks in the morning and evening peaks. 9 primary stations spaced approximately 12 to 43 miles apart. The 4 secondary stations that I mentioned, a maximum operating speed of 125. We'll probably only be able to reach that where it really opens up down between Colorado Springs and Pueblo. About a 1-minute dwell time at most stations, a little more in Denver and the airport and Colorado Springs stations just because of their size. Again, these initial model runs were based at 32 cents a mile. We've since run the new model runs at 17 cents per mile, and we're assuming parking at these various stations at around $2 a day. Those are all just modeling assumptions. Next slide. Again, the statewide model is something that appears, according to the Federal Railroad Administration, to be one of the most advanced in the country. This was adapted from the DRCOG model that they've been using for the last 10 years. Also with a lot of inputs from the North Front Range, Pikes Peak Area Council of Governments, and Pueblo Area COG models as well. The inputs
are on my computer. I decided just to listen on my phone. I never have to talk on this, so.
I'm sorry? Did somebody have a question?
Kristen, if you could just mute yourself, thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you. Again, the inputs are very specific personal household surveys and diaries to create this model. It's been checked against US Census data, vehicle and transit ridership counts. We compare some counts on I-25 up and down the corridor to sort of test percentages of people that might be transferring to rail, and all of these numbers are testing out very well. The outputs again are annual ridership. We can look at weekend and special events ridership. That tends to be about 20% of the total for the Colorado Front Range, and we actually can get this down to actual station boardings and alightings. So a lot of data to look at here, and we keep doing different sensitivity analysis related to all of these. Again, some very broad observations. Denver's the obvious hub. We do have very few end-to-end trips. A lot of these trips are basically Fort Collins to Boulder, Fort Collins to Loveland, to Longmont, Denver to Boulder, Denver to the Springs, Springs to Pueblo. So currently we're not seeing a lot of the larger long distance trips. A lot of commuting, but again, a lot of special events and recreational trips. And again, very important to the state of Colorado at this point in time is a lot of reduction in VMT and greenhouse gases. Next slide. Cost estimating. We're just in the process of starting to look at some preliminary cost estimates. So none of those are available to the public yet. The project team is just starting to put our eyes on these and making sure that we're comfortable with these before they're released to the public. We expect to do that, by the end of the year. But we're looking at not only the capital costs, but operating and maintenance costs for a Front Range passenger rail network. But again, we anticipate presenting this information to the Rail Commission by the end of 2020. Next slide. Obviously, a lot of the work over the last year has been doing some pre-NEPA work. So we've been identifying at a very high level, sort of a desktop level. We haven't been out in the field doing any of this work yet at this level of the project, but we're identifying historical sites and districts, floodplains, wetlands, parks, open spaces, obviously endangered species. There's some Preble's jumping mouse down around Castle Rock that we're going to have to make sure we avoid. Obviously, with a train, you've got some noise and vibration impacts, the greenhouse gases, issues related to right-of-way. And in this case, if we do wind up operating primarily within the freight rail rights-of-way, there may not be a lot of additional right-of-way in some places that we'll have to acquire. Certainly, with a project 180 miles long, you are going to have some right-of-way asks. Then certainly we're identifying places where minority and low income populations might be impacted by this new service. Again, though, they are, those kind of impacts are generally already there because of the considerable freight traffic along Colorado's Front Range Class 1 railroads. Next slide. These are the criteria we're using to compare the various alternatives against: operational characteristics, community environmental impacts, economic considerations. Cost will certainly be a eventual factor in an alignment selection. And lastly, feasibility and implementation. Where do the public, what lines do the public support? Where would they rather see these routes? How do the routes interact with the freight rail operators? What's the constructability of the project overall? Next slide. Next slide, please. This again shows those three alignments. The turquoise and the yellow sort of turns green north from Fort Collins into Longmont, but that's the alignment that was looked at in the North I-25 commuter rail update. I had the opportunity to be the project manager for that for Parsons Brinkerhoff back in 2014. A lot of you on this call were partners with us on that. But that is the purple, excuse me, the turquoise line generally appears to be the leader in terms of ridership at this early junction in the study. All of these alignments are technically feasible. They do have different partnership opportunities. Again, if we're going to operate and partner with RTD, then we certainly wouldn't be as interested in looking at the purple line. The purple line is where we can partner more with CDOT and the E470 authority by utilizing their rights of way. All of the routes have different impacts and benefits, and there may be some opportunities to mix and match these alignments as we move into NEPA. But we're anticipating that these will be the three routes that will, the alignments that will be moving forward into the NEPA process in a year or so. Next slide. Just going to chat briefly about some next steps. Again, the Front Range Passenger Rail Project has great momentum. We've had those three different surveys now. The middle survey that we did last October, that one asked likely voters in the 2020 election. It was a telephone poll of 13 Front Range counties. 85% of the people indicated that they supported the concept of Front Range passenger rail. And then we asked them the tougher question: would you be willing to raise your state sales tax to pay for a $5 billion project? We were surprised, the consultant was surprised, that 61% of the people said yes. Only 27% said they would not support that kind of a project. But the consultant told us that they were shocked by the fact that more than 2 to 1 people were saying they would raise their state sales tax to pay for this project. I think that's just a reflection on the congestion and the lack of reliability people see with their daily commutes up and down I-25 throughout most of the state. Again, the legislature is interested. We've had conversations with President of the Senate, Leroy Garcia. He wants us to continue moving some legislation into this next session to create the governance, create a rail district, a Front Range Passenger Rail Authority or something like that. I've already talked about Amtrak's interest in the corridor. Class 1 railroads are very interested. And I've had great conversations with RTD's Bill Van Meter. Bill is one of my 11 bosses, and Bill is looking forward to the new general manager coming online and having conversations with the commission about opportunities to partner with the Rail Commission on some of the issues of getting through the Denver metro area. Next slide. Sort of broken the next steps into policy, program, and project. Again, the policy is governance and funding and financing. We had a meeting yesterday with some of the JBC staff about the possibility of some funding from the legislature for Front Range Passenger Rail Commission operations in FY 2022. We're encouraging on the program side all the MPOs to make sure when they update their long-range plans that Front Range Passenger Rail is in those programs. We're encouraging local communities that are looking at having stops in their communities they better be either having a station area plan or start looking at developing a station area plan. I joke with folks that it's going to be really embarrassing for them if that passenger train pulls into town and they don't have a place to drop off their passengers. So I think people are getting that message. We heard from Colorado Springs the other day that they're identifying the funding to do their station area plan. Pueblo has just completed a very exciting station area plan. I'm sort of asking everybody to take a look at what Pueblo's done. They've done a great job and brought the community in, and they've got a couple of great alternatives that they're about to finalize. Lastly, on the project side, we've got to complete the alternatives analysis, do the final service development planning, the rail simulation modeling in terms of how this will interact with the Class 1 railroads, and then we'll be ready to advance into NEPA. Next slide. About a year ago, we were starting to talk about governance options, and leading up to the legislature this past January, there was a good possibility that we would have some governance related legislation. And then this COVID thing came along and sort of put that on the back burner. But the commission had been leaning toward supporting the second approach, basically the creation of a front range passenger rail authority. A lot of the specifics of that would need to be ironed out and negotiated with the legislature, but that's the proposal that the commission was leaning toward last year. Again, we're anticipating that some governance related legislation will likely be moving forward through the legislature in the 2021 session. Next slide. This is just some of our near-term next steps. Again, we've already initiated conversations with the legislature in terms of this governance and funding for the commission and its ongoing operations and planning efforts. We're continuing to identify a network of local elected officials. We last week just had our fourth series of the Segment Stakeholder Coalition. A lot of you on this call may have been on the Central Segment Coalition meeting. Again, 3 very excellent meetings in the North, Central, and South last week, and we'll continue to do this about quarterly throughout the course of this project. We'll continue to be updating folks on different organizations, committees, similar to the presentation I'm making with you folks today. That's what the commission is paying me and the commission liaison, Spencer Dodge. That's what we're paid to do. So don't be shy if you have any organization or subgroup of your organization that you'd like us to come talk to or do a Zoom call on, please get in touch. That's what we're here for. Again, we'll continue to, we'll have one more round of segment coalition meetings probably between Thanksgiving and Christmas at the end of this year. We're having every 6-week meetings with the Class 1s, continue to meet regularly with Amtrak and RTD in coordination. We'll continue to put press releases out. I think there's going to be a press release coming out about the Chrissy grant that we won. That should be out in the next couple days. And again, we'll keep updating our website and allow you to, take things off of our website and post it to some of your community pages and things like that if that's appropriate. Next slide. Oh, that's it. That note at the top, www.frontrangepassengerrail.com. That's the project website. Even though our existing consultant contract is about to expire, we're going to transfer this website to the commission, and Spencer and I will continue to keep that up to date. We're going to be putting up a frequently asked questions component to that. So please utilize that, and my contact information is also at the bottom of the slide here. So again, don't be shy. We want to keep getting the word out about this project. We've got a lot of momentum and we need to keep that momentum going. Amtrak has indicated we're #1, but he said there's a few corridors around the country that sort of have us as their target, and they wouldn't mind overtaking us in terms of being Amtrak's top priority for this new federal funding. All right, I think that's the end of my formal remarks. I'm certainly available to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Yes, thank you so much, Randy, for joining us again and giving us an update on this amazing project. I am going to circle it back to the group. Do we have any questions for Randy? Does anyone have any? Let's see, we have a question from Phil. Go ahead, Phil.
Hey, Randy, good morning. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Morning,
Great to
Phil.
hear, great to hear all the good news. Unfortunately, what I hear from other folks who are more in tune to rail than I am is that Amtrak's making cuts to the long haul services. How does that affect what you're talking about here with the enthusiasm Amtrak has for this corridor, but they're still cutting, it sounds like, the Zephyr and some of the long haul, maybe even the Chief, I don't know, but just wondering how that connects.
Absolutely. Ray has been very upfront with the commission. He made a great presentation to the commission at our meeting last month. He'll also be on our commission meeting tomorrow morning. But Amtrak is, in fact, because of the coronavirus, their ridership is down just like every other transit agency in the country. They're having to social distance and do different things in terms of their capacity. But they are on October 1st planning on going to 3-day-a-week service instead of everyday service. But they stress that this is only temporary. They've already set metrics in terms of when they'll go back to full 7-day-a-week service. So this is just, you know, not any different than some of the cuts RTD has had to make, that CDOT made with Mustang. It is totally, you know, totally coronavirus related. Their ridership actually nationally on their long distance trains set a record in 2019. In the first 2 months of 2020, those months were higher than the 2019 months. So they were anticipating literally a break-even year for Amtrak in 2020 until COVID came along. So Phil, that's a really good question, but and Ray stressed this on his national webinar yesterday. Their long distance cuts are strictly a temporary thing. They certainly hope to be back full 7-day-a-week service by next summer. Summers are their peak travel time, and they certainly hope to have 7-day-a-week service back online by summer of 2021.
Great, thanks, Randy.
You bet.
All right, thank you. Do we have any other questions for Randy? Anybody?
Yes, I've got
Feel free to
two.
jump in if you need to. Go ahead, Malcolm.
Randy, are you planning on electric or diesel service for this? And the second question would be, how would you overcome the challenges that have made it virtually impossible to get rail service through the Boulder corridor because of Burlington Northern's demands for significant money to use that corridor versus I-25 corridor?
Very good questions. First question, we're preliminarily planning to probably start with diesel. You can always convert to electricity and electric lines later, but cost purposes, we may start out at diesel and then convert. Diesel is still, you know, if you're moving people on a diesel passenger train, it is still considerably more greenhouse gas friendly than all of those cars. Obviously, electric trains are even more efficient in terms of that, but the initial cost of electrification of a 180-mile corridor would probably be considerably higher than the state might want to start with. But a lot of places start with diesel and then convert to electricity on down the road. In response to your second question, again, we've got an entirely different structure now. In this rail commission, BNSF is actually at the table. Their vice president of passenger rail operations, DJ Mitchell, is a stand-up guy, and he has totally changed the tone of the BNSF's cooperation on this commission since he came online this summer. We have some very confidential negotiations going on with both railroads right now. We'll be getting the governor involved in those conversations. So the entire footprint of freight transportation in the northern part of the state, you know, could be changing in the next few months, and we're looking forward to the opportunity to have a little more information about that. But we think some of the hurdles that existed with RTD and BNSF, those may be going away here in the next few months. So we're continuing to have very quiet conversations with them. Unfortunately, we can't be public about those yet, but there's some exciting opportunities, you know, on the horizon, we believe. So good question. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on electric versus diesel, since California has just recently passed legislation prohibiting the sale of gas cars in 15 years, I would encourage you to look at electrification as the primary option.
Thank you.
Julie, this is Judy Lubau.
Go ahead, Judy.
Yes, I wanted to piggyback on Phil's question about Amtrak cutting its long-range services. Given that that's happening, it seems like a difficult time for them to be also asking for money to increase their shorter range routes. And I'm just wondering, what do they say about that? That the timing seems to be so difficult.
All right, thanks, Judy. Yeah, again, they're basically say they are still fully committed to their long distance trains. They actually have a major capital program to upgrade all of the equipment on their long distance trains in the near future. Actually, their long distance service reductions were less of a hit on the national system than the Northeast Corridor system, which is basically their bread and butter and where most of their ridership comes from, is in the Northeast Corridor. But no, Amtrak's new CEO continues to say Amtrak has very strong plans to continue and get back to that 7-day-a-week service on their long distance trains, upgrade all the equipment, and they say they are very committed to the long distance network, which includes both the Southwest Chief and the California Zephyr through Colorado.
Can I ask one more? But I'm just wondering, in terms of Congress giving money for the shorter runs at the same time that the longer runs are being cut, it just seems like a difficult mixture. Have you heard anything about that?
Okay. The Amtrak proposal that, again, for federal reauthorization, not only includes that new $25 billion program, $5 billion a year for these shorter distance corridors like the Front Range, but it also includes increased funding for the rest of Amtrak's network, the long distance trains and the Northeast Corridor and all the other state supported services. So the House of Representatives in Congress has this year provided, through this new federal reauthorization proposal, unprecedented funding for national passenger rail. Obviously, the Senate hasn't agreed to that yet, and we've just heard in the last day or so, I think, that the Congress is going to approve a continuing resolution, which will basically mean next year we'll have the same kind of funding that everybody saw this year. But again, Ray yesterday on the call said he's confident that once a new reauthorization bill is undertaken by both the House and Senate, that the passenger rail funding will be at levels never heard of before. So, that we'll have to wait and see. These issues are all in the hands of Congress right at the moment.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other questions? I'm not seeing any other hands up or any other questions, but thank you, Randy, so much for joining us again and giving us such an amazing update on this project. It's very exciting, and it's great to see how it's progressing year by year. So we're definitely going to have you come back and continue to keep us updated on it. We're all very excited.
I'd be glad to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, go ahead, Judy.
Can we get the PowerPoint?
Yes. Go ahead, Carson.
Yes, it'll be up on the NATA website following this meeting. I'll be sure to upload this entire presentation there.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. I do need to circle back very quickly to Vince again. He had one more update he wanted to share with us.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll be very quick. As you know, several months ago, we went into a pandemic service plan. We reduced our service significantly, and since that time, we've been taking data on ridership, and in January 2021, we're going to have a new service plan that keeps our levels the same over the system, but reallocates service to areas that are more heavily demanded, and as a result will reduce some areas that are showing little demand. In my district and Director Whitmore's district, not too much. There's some in Boulder, some reductions in Boulder on the 205, 228, and 225. But that's about it up north. We've got increases on Federal Boulevard, the number 31, and on Colfax, number 16. In any event, public comment on service changes will close on October 14th, and all of those are all the service change proposals are on our website. The changes will go to the Operations Committee, RTD Operations Committee, on October 20th, and the board will be voting on this on October 27th. So if anybody's interested in what the changes are going to look like in 2021, go to the website, make sure you get some comments in, and just to be sure, the majority of us on the board have pushed very hard to ensure that these are called, this is the Pandemic Service Plan 2, just so we know these are temporary and not permanent, but are caused by the pandemic. That's all I have, and thanks for getting back to me.
All right, great, thanks, Vince. All right, folks, so let's move on. We have another presentation, HPTE and a CDOT update. Nick or Paul on the line?
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we hear you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, great. Good morning, everybody. I'm Paul Chasitis. I'm CDOT's Region 1 Transportation Director. I'm pleased this morning to provide an update on the I-25 North area today. And also want to introduce Nick Farber from our High Performance Transportation Enterprise Director. He'll be speaking a little bit after me, and along with Andy Stratton, our CDOT Region 1 Program Engineer for the North area. So with that, can you switch over to the next slide? All right, so I'm gonna just do a quick run through our agenda today. We're gonna talk about I-25 North, 84th to 104th history. That project's been going on a long time, and so want to give a little bit of a recap from the past. We're going to talk about I-270 preliminary traffic analysis results. We've been extremely busy in the area of 270, I-25 North, looking at traffic analysis. So we want to have a chance to present that to you all today. And then, of course, we talked already a bit today about RTD changes to transit service in this area. So we want to touch on that. We have a Direct Connects development plan update for you, and that's the Direct Connects from Interstate 270 to I-70, and then from Interstate 270 to US 36 and I-25. And then Nick will present on HPTE updates on I-25 North funding opportunities. And then finally, we'll just close out with some next steps for evaluating I-25 improvements. Next slide, please. All right, so just a little bit of history surrounding this I-25 North area. We did a project that was actually completed in 2016 to add those managed lanes that people are using from US 36 up to 120th. That was a $65 million investment. It was recognized at the time that the full funding couldn't be provided for that corridor, and the congestion was extreme, and CDOT was asked to do something quickly to help address that. And the project did improve congestion, but it also introduced some safety issues with the tight template. What I mean by that is narrow shoulders. We have a buffer that's normally 4 feet that is only 2 feet wide. So we did see an increase in crashes. We actually have spent a lot of time implementing a series of operational changes to the corridor, things like rumble strips, better signing, and that was as a result of a collaborative process where we did a roadway safety audit with the local agencies, federal highways, and CDOT. And we've actually implemented most of the near-term solutions and saw some benefit with that. CDOT's also working on an EA from 84th to 104th Avenue to look at this stretch of I-25, and that's based on originally some PEL recommendations that go way back to 2012. We did come up with one $230 million solution that would actually double the width of the highway to accommodate a center loading median bus station there at about the Thornton Park and Ride around 88th. But we also feel like now is a really good time to take a fresh look at this area and make sure we're doing things right. As you all know, there have been COVID funding cuts at CDOT, and of course, along with our local agencies. We've got the opening of the N line that we think will influence traffic patterns. We've got construction of I-270 improvements. So we have a couple $100 million planned for year 4 of Senate Bill 267, so 2 years out from now. And then, you know, we're also really want to take a strong look at how do we address safety concerns in the near term for the I-25 corridor, because we have seen some of those. Next slide, please. So, you know, you can kind of see from this map here, everything is interrelated. The map doesn't actually show the Central 70 project, which is due to be completed in 2022. So that will go online with its managed lane. And then, of course, we have our I-270 EA that we are blazing along with right now in hopes of getting it done in the next couple of years and ready for construction on that corridor. You know, what happens on Central 70 affects Interstate 270. And then the little green dot there is our express lanes, direct connections, development plan. And so that's really how do you take traffic from Interstate 270 and put it onto I-25 North, for example. How does that traffic flow from 270 onto Interstate 25? And then, of course, the I-25 section there, already pretty congested. So if we open up the bottleneck on I-270, what happens to Interstate 25? I've heard traffic engineers joke that in metro areas, what we really do is move bottlenecks around. So we want to do that as effectively as possible. We really want to see how one area influences the other area and not create a problem for ourselves. Next slide, please. And I'll let Andy Stratton talk about the I-270 traffic modeling. Thank you all.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, so you can see from that previous map how interrelated these two corridors are. And so while we don't have the 230 million right now with all the budget cuts, you know, it was a good time to take a fresh look at that area on I-25 North. But as we started looking at 270, we came up with some correlations between, you know, as we improve 270, we're creating more problems for traffic as they try and get on the I-25 area if we don't have any improvements on North I-25. So what this preliminary traffic modeling shows, this is the westbound direction on I-270 in the PM peak period. I-70 is down at the bottom of the corridor, you know, where you get on 270, and then I-25 is at the top of the corridor. And what this heat map is basically showing is where our congestion and what our speeds are along the 270 corridor. Once we make improvements to the corridor and relieve some of the bottlenecks that naturally occur right now, like at Vasquez, we push all that traffic down to I-25. And the ramp from 270 onto northbound I-25 currently backs up right now. And once we relieve all that bottleneck, you know, it just creates more of a backup, and it dials back, as you can see, all the way through the 270 corridor. So what this really told us preliminarily is that the north area of I-25 through this stretch, 84th to 104th, is very critical to making 270 successful as well. Without improvements in that area, we really don't have improvements, or we really don't see any improvements on 270. Next slide. And so this is just more of a graphic or a visual of what the heat map was showing. But you can see westbound 270 to northbound I-25, we have the single ramp right now onto northbound I-25. The red right there shows generally where the existing backups are occurring right now in 2020. While they don't dial back all the way onto mainline right now, they do come back on the ramp a ways, and once we make those improvements on 270 and relieve all that traffic, the black line shows what we're projecting in 2040 for those backups on 270. So it's really critical. It just points to we really do need to take a fresher look at this I-25 corridor if we don't have money to build the entire medium bus station or what the EA was recommending based on our previous data that we had. Next slide. One thing that we noticed is that, you know, this particular stretch of I-25, you know, has where 270 comes into northbound I-25. It also has US 36 and I-76 all coming together. Their ramps, system to system ramps, all come together at one point and join with the 270 ramp and head northbound on I-25. And so, you know, taking, you know, 55,000 volume of traffic into one lane on northbound I-25, it just does not have as much time to weave and get into mainline traffic. And so that's kind of what one of the big issues is three systems, you know, coming together in one spot and moving northbound. You know, that's like 40% of the volume on mainline I-25. You can see the 3 lanes of mainline I-25 in green there. We have our ramp, 3 different ramps coming together in our red line on northbound I-25. And then all that traffic has to merge onto mainline within a mile before it exits at 84th. And so it just creates a huge bottleneck and a huge problem there. And so with this information, I mean, it's easy to see why that backup is occurring. And so we need to take a look at solutions on how to make sure we can possibly extend that merge length, you know, further to the north to allow all this traffic to weave a little longer and keep speeds a little higher instead of bottlenecking I-25 mainline down as well as the ramps. Next slide. In addition, you know, this area up there, 84th to 104th, you know, the Thornton Park and Ride bus slip ramps are in there. And during the PEL and EA, we had identified that as some operational improvements with the bus weaving issues from the express lanes out to the slip ramps on the outside. And then the buses trying to get from the slip ramps back up to speed in a short distance of time back into the express lanes. And so we had tried to look previously at how we accommodate those buses in that transit to lessen the impact on mainline I-25. And so we had come up with the median station. But now with RTD's N-line service beginning and transit ridership low, we're starting to have different discussions with RTD on what that means for some of their services. And as you can see from this map, the N-line is just about a mile and a half to the east of you know, this stretch of corridor. So we're taking a look at different opportunities of discussions on, you know, possibly how the N-line might impact the bus ridership on the I-25 corridor at some point in the future. And that kind of changes the discussion of what kind of transit accommodations or how important the transit accommodations are at the Thornton Park and Ride from the I-25 standpoint. So we'll be having, we're actually meeting with RTD later on this afternoon to start the discussions on some of this. And, you know, that'll help inform us of what type of, you know, improvements we need to make moving forward in this stretch of I-25. Next slide. We also have the Express Lanes Master Plan direct connections in the area of the 270, I-25 and US 36 interchange, as you can see right here. And I'm not going to go into detail. It's a spaghetti bowl mess of different ramps right now. This is just the concept, a high level concept that was laid out in the Express Lanes Master Plan. And we're taking a closer look at how some of these connections can be made. But these connections do have a big impact on the section of I-25, you know, from US 36 to the north. So as we move forward in the next couple months of trying to determine how some of these connections can be made, that's also going to influence how some of the improvements to the north can be integrated into this. This Express Lanes Master Plan direct connections is another reason why we're taking another look at this area moving forward. And then we'll merge into, you know, we have the Express Lanes Master Plan that we talked about, 270, a major influence. Some of the transit changes right now all those are going to influence what we do moving forward on North I-25. And then we also have a lot of corridor funding opportunities that we're starting to talk about. You know, with the express lanes already in service in segment 2, we're underway and wrapping up a new traffic and revenue analysis on segment 2. We're going to be undertaking a traffic and revenue analysis on the 270 corridor as the EA moves through. That'll help inform and give a closer look at what funding, what toll revenue is available to build some of these improvements. Like Paul had mentioned, we have $200 million on year 4 of Senate Bill 267 for the 270 corridor. And then we also have an I-25 North TIFIA opportunity that I'm going to turn over to Nick Farber right now with HPTE, and he's going to tell more about that.
Thanks, Andy. So I'm Nick Farber. I'm the director of the Colorado High Performance Transportation Enterprise. I've met a lot of you guys before, and I think you're familiar with what our office does. We oversee the segment 2 express lanes and the segment 3 express lanes, and all of the other express lanes here in Colorado. I wanted to talk a little bit about TIFIA, since we're moving forward with the TIFIA loan on I-25. Just kind of explain the background of it, like what it actually is. So it's actually, TIFIA stands for the Transportation Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act. It provides federal credit assistance in the form of direct loans, loan guarantees, and standby lines of credit. And very few borrowers across the country have actually used loan guarantees or standby lines of credit. Maybe 1 or 2 standby lines of credit, but most of the use has been in terms of the direct loans, and that's what we used on US 36 Phase 1 before we turned it over to plenary, and on C470, which we have in place right now. Next slide, please. TIFIA provides a ton of benefits. It's an extremely favorable loan program offered by the United States Department of Transportation's Build America Bureau. It has extremely flexible repayment terms. So it's a 30-year credit with a 5-year grace period. They allow for traffic to ramp up on the corridor before you start paying. So you can defer payments for the first 5 years. Extremely favorable interest rates. It's 1.43% as of earlier this week. And I checked today before I got on, and it's still 1.43%. You can leverage large projects. You can only borrow up to 33% of the federally eligible expenses on a project. So for instance, on C470, it was a $276 million project, and we borrowed $107 million for that, and borrowed another $161 million in toll-back revenue bonds. Another thing that's really favorable about TIFIA is that it has a spring lien incorporated in the loan itself, which means like on C470, it sits subordinate to the bonds. So, but if we ever default on the bonds, then that lien springs ahead of the bonds. So they get paid first instead of the bonds. It's very popular in Congress and across the country. So it's always received a large appropriation from Congress. Next slide. So the process to actually start the TIFIA loan is actually we submit a letter of interest to the United States Department of Transportation's Build America Bureau. They review it and request further information like traffic and revenue studies or other financial data. It's a lengthy process. Then upon completion, they invite us to apply. It's a more in-depth application, and that takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months. Next slide. So what we're doing on I-25 North with TIFIA, because Paul mentioned it earlier with COVID-19 and the effects on funding with Senate Bill 267, the I-25 North project, some of that funding was in the Senate Bill 267 funds from years 3 and 4 became in jeopardy for the project. So instead of putting all of our eggs in one basket with Senate Bill 267, we're spreading that across the state to other areas, and we're looking at financing, especially TIFIA, to help fill that hole. On I-25, we're structuring it as we did on C-470, which is a master trust indenture structure. So on C-470, segment 1 goes from I-25 to Wadsworth, and segment 2 goes from Wadsworth to I-70. So the TIFIA loan anticipates another project from Wadsworth to I-70, as will this loan will anticipate. So we're having near-term needs, which is to refinance our Bank of America loan on segment 3 and then provide $154 million to 6, 7, and 8. So all the revenues from the corridor from segment 2 to segment 8 will flow through that master trust indenture. And as future projects, those long-term needs come online, like Andy was talking about in terms of I-25 segment 2, our segment 3 needs, we can then use this master trust indenture process to add new loans to the corridor and support that I-25 North comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. So next steps for us on TIFIA is we've been working on an LOI, a letter of interest, for the past few months. We are getting very close on that. We sent around the final draft for review internally, and this week, and we'll be sending it to TIFIA by midday tomorrow. The next steps for the TIFIA will then hire their financial advisors and legal advisors, and that will take about 3 to 4 months since they have to publicly procure it. We will then negotiate the loan with TIFIA, which is another 3 to 4 months. So we expect financial close on the I-25 North TIFIA loan in late spring, early summer. And I put the asterisk there because I think Randy mentioned that we have the reauthorization of the FAST Act. We also have a change in administration, and that could, we could have a change in administration. So that could affect the timing of the closing of the TIFIA loan. For example, on C-470, we were aiming to close in January of 2016, early 2017, December 2016, January 2017, and we ended up closing in June of 2017 because it took the Trump administration so long to appoint people at the Department of Transportation to actually sign off on the loan. So it could be, we could be closing by May, June of next year, or it could be a little bit later, maybe around this time next year, depending on factors that are outside of our control. That's, I think, all I had on I-25 North and TIFIA. If you could just go to the next slide just to double check. Yep. So the next steps, I think Andy was going to go over this, but quickly, and then we'll go into questions.
Yeah, so just wrapping up here. So our next steps on this I-25 segment is to, understand the 270 traffic analysis further. What I presented was just some preliminary results. So we want to further analyze that and figure out what improvements we're going to need to make in order to make 270 function. Continue to discuss and monitor the bus service plan changes based on the N line. With RTD, we're going to complete our TNR studies, evaluate the impacts of our direct connects master plan at 270 and 25, and all that information will help feed into ultimately a design charrette that we're looking to have to evaluate our I-25 North improvements in early 2021 that we'll be engaging the local stakeholders in to take part to make sure we're coming up with some good solutions with all this new information that we have. So look for that coming up in the future. And so, yeah, that's our next steps. And so we'll have any questions. And I believe Karen Stewart has a comment that she wants to make here as we wrap up.
Yes, go ahead, Karen.
Thanks very much. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that as your CDOT commissioner for this region, and I sit on the HPTE as well, I'm going to carefully look at this TIFIA trust indenture project program that Nick is putting together. It takes in the revenue from segments 2 through 8 to pay back the loans. As you can see, 154 million goes out immediately to pay for improvements up north of us, 23 million to change out the loan on segment 3. There's no improvements for 2 or 3 immediately. However, as projects become available, and that is most likely segment 2 and 3 projects that are identified once we take a new look at what we need to do on these segments, they'll be eligible as well to get some of this funding to make this happen. And that's probably the most expedient way we'll get these things done. We will at that time then have most likely some revenue stream beyond just segment 2 and 3, in that those improvements up north will also be paying into this, so that there'll be money available for the projects in our area as well. I'm going to watch this really closely. I'm going to watch it really closely because we have always maintained up here that the revenues that are collected in our segment should go back to our segment to make the improvements that are necessary and weren't done in the initial improvements. I think this is a good option, and I think it's an option that will help us get everything done. So we'll keep an eye on this. As I noticed in the presentation that Paul Jositis gave, we will be working with RTD on this. We have a call with them today to talk about the real needs for RTD on this corridor, and that will reduce the cost, hopefully, of the larger amount that we've looked at in the past. We need to either reduce the scope or reduce the cost, or both. And if we do that, we want to be sure we're doing it in a manner that really improves the safety issues that we have on this corridor. So just want to reiterate that I'll be watching this pretty closely. If any of you have any concerns that you want me to bring to the commission, please let me know that as well, because I'm your voice at the commission. Thanks a lot. Those are my comments.
Great, thank you. Andy, do you want to respond to Paul's question in the chat?
Yeah, I will. So Paul asked about the $230 million project that we had identified that includes the center median station at 88th Avenue, Thornton Park and Ride. Those improvements include widening I-25 in addition to the median station from 84th up to 104th, and extending that auxiliary lane ramps, additional lanes all the way up to 104. So it's for the whole package. It's just not for the median station. But the median station has a big impact on that area because we have to do a whole lot of widening and reconstruction. So out of that 230 million, about $100 million or so is probably attributed to the center loaded median station. But it does include all the improvements in that section.
Okay, thank you. So one of the questions that I have specifically, and you kind of touched on it towards the end of your presentation, was this is a very, very important project, I think, for many of us, specifically Thornton and Northland. And a lot of it is because of the safety issues, not to mention the horrible congestion that we're seeing as folks come down I-25. So how can local governments be involved earlier here on this project? Because I think it's really important that our voices are at the table when we're starting to kick around some ideas of what could work best. So how can we make sure that that happens?
Yeah, no, I completely agree that it is important for the locals to be involved and help, help voice the concerns that we do need to make some improvements in this area, sooner rather than later. And that's why we're going to bring you in, to that design charrette when we're ready. We need to get some of this information on 270 and the direct connects kind of going, and you guys will be brought in through the 270 process as well. So I think sooner rather than later, we will be meeting with you guys to make sure you're informed and providing input as we move along.
Okay, thank you. I think it's just such an important aspect to consider, and we need to really make sure that we're bringing that voice for our residents into that area. So do we have any other questions for the group? I'm not seeing any hands. Feel free to jump in, anybody, if you do have a question. Okay, I'm not hearing anything right now. Oh, there you go, Phil. Go ahead.
Well, it was a very interesting discussion, and I thought the way Paul started it out with, we kind of joke about moving bottlenecks from one area to the other. I hope that just reminds all of us that really it's going to be really difficult to ever build ourselves out of congestion completely, unless we want to look like California or Phoenix, and I don't think anybody wants to do that. So I'm hoping that, and I know they are, the CDOT folks are working well with their Division of Transit and Rail and making sure that we have those other options that we're looking at. We just opened the N line, we're very excited about that. N line's not going to get the ridership if we keep trying to reduce congestion on this corridor. Unfortunately, congestion is going to probably have to be part of that. Part of that is that people will need to want to move to the rail. And I understand during COVID, it's a hard discussion to have. And so just wanted to remind folks of that and just see if there's how CDOT is working with that Division of Transit and Rail to come up with some other solutions in this corridor. I know they're looking at bus.
Hey, Phil, this is Paul. I completely agree with you. And that really is why we're taking another look with the N line opening. We're working with HPTE on managed lanes, so that we can provide a reliable trip. But it is a managed lane, and so we do price congestion when we're doing that. So, but I think it is very appropriate at this point to really look at the impact of the N line and look at the transportation as a system rather than just a highway, right? So just agreeing with you is all. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Okay, so we are at time, and so I don't want to hold this meeting over. This is a really important conversation to continue, and it sounds like a lot of that is going to be going probably involved in the 270 group that's meeting this week or next week. So we'll definitely keep this conversation front and center, and we'll continue to share our feedback with Karen and you guys to just make sure that we get this project done right. So are there any other final thoughts before I close out this meeting?
Julie, we'd like to share some photos from the opening, and if people want to leave, that's great, but we have a collage of fabulous photos from the N line opening that we'd like to run, if you don't mind.
Yes, please share the collage, and if you do have to jump off, feel free. I just want to thank everybody for joining us this morning. It was great discussions, great updates, so I really appreciate everyone's participation. All right, let's go to the slide.
This is a quick drone shot from the North Glen station. I thought it was worth sharing. There's no audio, but it's about 30 seconds, and I thought it was pretty neat. All right, so I'm just going to flip through these. I think you guys will see yourselves here in these photos, but obviously starting here at the East Lake Grain Silos, and other people are welcome to join in if they'd like to commentate, but I will just continue to flip through.
I have to laugh because this is historical. You see us all wearing masks in most of these. And in the future, this will be an anomaly, right? It will be one snapshot in time when a public event had everyone in masks. I think it's just interesting.
This is the artist from the North Glen station that did the horses. We were able to get a good shot of him behind one of it, or in front of one of his pieces there along the wall. The ribbon cutting. Some more shots from North Glen. Here's the end of line celebration with everybody appropriately spaced out. Looks a little weird. Like Karen said, it'll be a snapshot in history when we look back on this one.
Yeah, that one was a little awkward, just seeing, just sitting so far away from everybody else. But you got to do what you got to do.
Both sides of the selfie here from Director Busick. Crowd. So all three general managers.
Yeah, this is great to have this shot of the three general managers who brought this to fruition. It was fabulous to have them all there.
Full RTD board shot. I think that's the last one.
Yep.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for sharing those photos. And if anybody has anything else that they want to share, send them over to Carson or Tammy. I think it would be good to kind of, memorialize that. And of course, having photos of everybody in masks is going to be interesting for the books. So just a reminder, our next meeting is October 22nd. We're only going to be meeting for an hour from 7:30 to 8:30. And then we're going to head over to the Transform event from 8:30 to 10. So just make sure that everybody blocks off a little extra time on your calendar for October 22nd. And then coming up in December, we have some great introductions for the new general manager. And then, of course, the new District I director yet to be determined. So any other final questions or comments? All right, then I'm going to close out this meeting. Thank you all for joining me this morning. And I can't wait till October 22nd for the annual Transform. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Bye,
Julie.
everybody.